We're at the Lower Institute International Indigenous Health and Wellbeing Conference, and I'm here with Jenifer. We're going to be talking issues of language because the conference here is marking the UN Year of Indigenous Languages. Jenifer, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself and where you're working and what your family connections are?
My name is Jenifer Darr. I'm now running my own consultancy business. But more importantly, I am a Yuri-Burra woman from central Queensland in Mackay region, and that's my dad's country, and so I have connection back to that. I am also, as part of that, an applicant for our native title process, and I've been involved in this since 2013, and in January 2020 we are actually going to be handed consent determination. And so as one party to three people that actually make up the applicant, the stuff that really sits core and central to me is how do we as First Nations people actually start to get, through our native title process, some economic development. And how do we do that in a holistic way that actually allows us to restore the stuff that we've lost? And I know for me personally, in my individual family's journey, i.e. my father, it was my great-grandmother and my grandmother. My great-grandmother knew her language, my grandmother knew her language, and they were rounded up and placed on the biggest Aboriginal reserve in Queensland, in Mackay, in the late 1890s. And my great-grandmother knew her language, my grandmother knew her language, and my dad never knew his language and couldn't pass that on to us as his children. And I know for me that language is core and centre. It is the stuff that grounds us. It is the stuff that allows us to be who we are. It anchors us back to our being within that whole entire setting. It's the stuff that gives us who we are.
You said yesterday we had a panel session here of the Nankari women from the APY lands talking in language, in their languages. And that really resonated with you. It was really hard and powerful.
It was a simple message that they used. She used by explaining that there was this thing coming over her, and she used a blanket, and the thing coming over, and it was an analogy for the thing that was coming over her was the English language. And it was that simple act was so powerful yet so moving, and it had me in tears because I could so relate to that being that very same subtle experience felt by my grandmother to my father. And here I am today, the third generation. I'm from my grandmother and can't speak language.
Jenifer, you said it was powerful to hear from Peter Yu here at the conference. He's Broome, the name of his organisation, but he talked very much about the importance of language, where language for his community had gone down to just 10 fluent speakers. What was it that struck you about him?
What was it that struck me was that that's come about out of their native title process. And for me, where we are now for Yuri-Burra is that we've got words that are conversational pieces like hello, goodbye, how are you, that stuff. And what struck me with him was that exactly, they only had 10 bits, but moving on from that, what he did do when they actually did get their native title was the first thing they did was set up a language centre. And that's the stuff that really resonated. Today, he could get up at the podium at the Lower conference and give that amazing keynote speech in his language. And that's the stuff that's moved me to tears. It really did move me to tears. And even for those women yesterday, you know, It's the stuff that's central to who we are.
You said about hope, about what can happen, but about responsibility. Where does the responsibility lie for this? What do you do? What are you thinking?
I believe that it's the responsibility of federal government. They were the ones who introduced the policy way back when. And it was a systematic attempt to annihilate who we are. And so therefore, I believe that it's their responsibility to actually come, have a conversation with us about how we, together, restore language back in those First Nations people who don't have a language and would like to restore language. I think that would be a great first step forward. Thank you, federal government.
Before we finish up, because you have to head off, what other takeaways do you have from this conference, and just for what it's stirred up in you?
Look, I have found this Lowitja conference beautiful in a way that it has been so holistic. And when you're talking about Indigenous health and wellbeing, it has to be holistic. You have to look at it from an environmental perspective. You have to look at it from a cultural perspective. You have to look at it from all of those political policies that have gone on in the past and how that has actually brought us to it and informed where we are today in terms of our health and wellbeing. That is what I love about Lowitja and this 2019 conference. Thank you, Lowitja.
Thank you so much, Jenifer.